the former Brexit Secretary Dominic Raab, who joins us now live. Thank you very much for being with us. So we just heard from Matt Hancock, the House Secretary, who said that there is still a chance that the deal could get through on Tuesday. What's your assessment?
Well, look, I think Matt's doing a great job there as Health Secretary and on the no-deal planning, as he described. But I think we need to remember the original deal was voted down, biggest parliamentary defeat in history, 230 votes. Parliament and MPs then supported the Prime Minister to go back and make legally binding changes to the backstop and support the Malthouse Compromise. And what we've seen from the EU is pretty much total intransigence. There was a tweet by Michel Barnier last night going back to the very provocative offer to split up the approach to Northern Ireland, which would threaten the economic and constitutional integrity of the UK. So I think in the absence of any change, it's difficult to see why the result on the vote would be different.
So you agree with Sir Keir Starmer then, which is effectively the deal is exactly the same as what was put to MPs before?
Well, I want to see whether there's anything new presented by the Attorney General or the government. There are ongoing discussions. And, if there's a last-minute breakthrough, terrific. But I don't see that the deal that failed by 230 votes somehow whistles through without any meaningful change to it.
Is it inevitable, then, that it's going to lose?
I don't think it's inevitable because the EU could, at the 11th hour, say, do you know what, there's a reasonable ask here that Parliament's insisted on, the changes to the backstop. We can then get some closure, get this deal done and move on. But the EU needs to move. This is a negotiation, and I think it's interesting that Michel Barnier was going back to an old, rejected set of offers rather than saying, OK, well, let's try and meet you halfway, which is what normally should happen in a negotiation.
So if the deal doesn't go through, then we're expecting to have these series of votes on whether to leave on the 29th of March with no deal or whether to have an extension. Now, I know that on the show before you said that no deal is not your preferred outcome. So how would you vote in these potential votes?
Oh, it's certainly not my preferred outcome, but I think we would be able to manage the risks of it, and that would free us to grasp the opportunities.
So you'd prefer it to an extension, would you?
Oh, I think an extension, put it this way, none of the challenges or the problems that we've got now get any better if we extend. And what it will do is embolden those who frankly want to derail and frustrate Brexit. So I think we should keep our promises, frankly, on this. We've legislated, so the default position is that we leave on the 29th of March, preferably with a deal, if not on WTO terms. But if that doesn't happen, I think we should keep the promise that every Conservative made in the manifesto, that no deal was better than a bad deal.
Some of your colleagues in the Conservative Party have rather more should we say, colourful ways of expressing their opposition to an extension. We can have a look at what Steve Baker and Nigel Dodds wrote in the Sunday Telegraph today. This is about if there was an extension. Yes. The harm done to public trust in politics and democracy itself would be incalculable. For some, democracy would be effectively dead. Is that right?
I think they're absolutely right to talk about the public frustration and the day of reckoning that all politicians will have with the voters if we don't keep our promises on Brexit. It was very clear. We would try and get a deal. I've always supported that. I supported in the last series of votes changes to the deal that would make them acceptable to the UK and therefore to Parliament. In the absence, we need to leave on WTO terms. And I believe that we'd actually then be in a stronger position after an interim period to then continue the negotiations on the longer term relationship with the EU.
So should it be whipped then, the no-deal vote? Would you like to see Theresa May whip it?
Oh, we've absolutely got to whip the vote to keep our manifesto pledges. How can a government function that doesn't keep its promises?
Well, even though she'll lose, we think, a few members of her cabinet. I mean, it could really split the Conservative Party.
Well, the divisions in the Conservative Party and indeed in the Labour Party and indeed in the country are well known. But what people want to see now, and the public overwhelmingly, and there's polling showing this sense is growing, is to get Brexit done. I put my hand up to be Brexit Secretary at a time when we needed compromise. It hasn't been matched by the EU. I think the public now, business and ordinary voters, just want the finality of getting this done on the 29th.
At the same time, though, I accept your point that people want it to be done, they want it to be over. It's something that we hear a lot on Sophie Ridge on Sunday when we go to different parts of the country as well. But at the same time, if you're talking about a small extension to get a deal, isn't that something that most people would say, OK, we understand, if we're going to leave anyway, we'll accept that?
But is there any sign from the EU that they would say, OK, we need a few extra weeks because we need to work on this question of the exit mechanism? If Michel Barnier had come back with something positive, the mood might be different, but he hasn't. He's come back with the very provocative set of proposals, which would effectively put a wedge between Northern Ireland and the rest of Great Britain. That'd be very damaging for Northern Ireland, but it would have other precedents for the rest of the UK. That's clearly unacceptable. So it feels to me that we've reached close to the end of the road, but let's see, more proposals could come from the EU in the next few days. But we've reached the point at which the EU is just insisting on this very bad deal because it wants to exercise control over us and not really allow us to leave the EU and take the opportunities of leaving the EU.
Well, let's be crystal clear. What would Theresa May have to get back from Brussels for you to support the deal?
I think
a realistic proposition.
Well, I think the assurances that were given when we backed the series of votes, which said to the Prime Minister, if you go back to the EU, get legally binding changes to the withdrawal agreement, in particular, deal with this question of the exit mechanism so that we're not caught in a regime of laws that we can't control, we can't get out of. If we got something around that, I think the mood...
Michel Barnier also did tweet about some more assurances being given, saying the EU doesn't want it to be something that is going to be indefinite.
Yes, but look, some of those warm words are fine and welcome, but what we need is legally binding changes. That's what Parliament backed the Prime Minister to go and negotiate, and that's what, in fairness, the Attorney-General has been really striving and working really hard to try and deliver. So let's see, there's still time. But this is for the EU to decide now. The EU needs to work out whether they've got the pragmatism, the flexibility.
Well, we chose to leave, didn't we? So it's up to us as well.
We didn't. No, sure, and that's why we've got all the compromise inherent in this deal. What we can't do is be locked into that whole range of rules, from customs rules, from economic rules to tax policy to social regulation, and have no control of it. That wouldn't be faithful to the referendum.
Now,